Raise up your hand. We'll see if we'll have somebody get you a Bible. Keep your hands raised up and we'll get you Bibles. It's about need a couple over here. Anybody else need a Bible? We're going to be in Deuteronomy chapter 13 through 16. We're just going to hit some points out of it. It's pretty interesting reading, so you do want to make sure take some time to go home and read it, but probably not something we're going to spend a lot of time reading. Most of it in class here today or in services today. So what I thought I'd do is I'd just do a review of Moses' life. Just kidding. For those of you who were here last week, we did that last week. So, but Moses is about to take them into, he's not going to take them into the promised land. The children of Israel are about to enter the promised land, and Moses is giving them some of the last words, things, because he's not allowed to go into the promised land. You remember why he's not allowed to go into the promised land? He got angry. God told him, speak to the rock when they were complaining about water. And instead of speaking to the rock, he smacks it a couple times. He tells these people that they're stubborn and they always got to provide for them. And so God tells him, you're not going into the promised land. So Aaron is already dead. He's already gone on. Moses is about to be, and he's given some last words to the children of Israel. And these are the folks that were 19 and under. So 20 and under, not 20 and under, but under 20 who were in Egypt. Those are the ones who saw what took place. Everybody else that was in Egypt that came in, what happened to them? Died in the wilderness because they disobeyed the Lord. They were afraid to go in to the promised land when he took them there, so they spent 40 years in the wilderness. And so now Moses is going to remind them some things they need to know before they go into the promised land. And so that's what we want to look at. One of the things he's going to tell them, the lesson is serve the Lord and stay faithful. This is 13 through 16. Just a reminder of what we talked about last week. You remember he said, what does the Lord want? What does the Lord require from you? You remember our points? First thing was fear the Lord your God. The second thing was walk in all his ways. Third thing was love him. The fourth thing was serve him with all your heart and soul. And the last thing was keep all the Lord's commands and decrees or statutes. He's going to remind them, going back in Deuteronomy chapter 6, he's going to tell them, and this is something they're going to need to know before they go into the promised land. He said, when the Lord your God brings you into the land he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and to Jacob, it's a land with large, flourishing cities that what? You did not build. Houses are going to be filled with all kinds of good things that what? You did not provide. And the wells that you did not dig, and vineyards and olive groves you did not plant. Interesting word, vineyards. Isn't it vine and yards? And so why don't we say vineyards, but we say vineyards? I thought that was interesting. Anyway, sorry I get distracted sometimes. He says, and then when you eat and you're satisfied, be careful that you do not forget the Lord who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. So who gives them the land? The Lord does, right? The Lord is the one who brought them out of Egypt. The Lord's the one who is going to bring them into the land. But when they go into the land, it's going to get very tempting to get comfortable, because they're going to live in houses they didn't build. They're going to eat food that they didn't plant. They're going to drink water out of wells that they didn't dig. They're going to have all these good things from the Lord. And so Moses is going to remind them, you need to remember this. Do not forget the Lord when he takes you into this place. And so he's going to tell them 4 things in Deuteronomy chapter 13 through 16. Again, we're going to slide through this a little quicker today. because I think it'll be easier for us. The first thing he's going to tell them, you need to worship God alone. This is in Deuteronomy in chapter 13. Take the time to read it when you get home. But he says to him in verses 1 through 3, if a prophet or one who foretells dreams appears among you and announces to you a miraculous sign or wonder, and if the sign or the wonder of which he has spoken takes place, and he says, let us follow other gods, gods you have not known, and let us worship them, you must do what? Do not listen to that prophet or that dreamer. So here's a guy comes along, and this is really, it's going to be a test. When they get into the land, they're going to be tested because of all the nations that are going to be around them and all the different gods that they worship. And he says there's going to come a prophet. Now, it's a false prophet, but he's going to come, and he's going to tell you all these things, and he's going to do, it could even do a miraculous sign. Is the miraculous sign, maybe will it happen? Yeah, it says so. It says what he does may come true. But if he tells you to do what? Follow other gods, what are you supposed to do? You don't listen to that prophet, right? Why? Right, because there is only one God. Because the Lord your God is testing you to find out whether you love him with all your heart and with all your soul. That's what he says. He's testing you. Now, he's not testing them in a way that he's hoping that they fail. But if he's going to find out if he loves them, they have to have opportunity to not. Does that make sense? I mean, if you want somebody to love you, they have an opportunity. They have to have a choice in the matter. And so he's giving them, this is their choice. Do they really love me or not? Are they going to do what I say or not? Are they going to still obey me or not? And so he's kind of showing them that. And in verse 4, he said, "Is it the Lord your God you must follow, and him you must revere. Keep his commands and obey him, serve him, and hold fast to him." Okay? And so that's point number 1 under this subpoint. Now, then he goes on in chapter 13, he says, what if it's your brother, or your son, or your daughter, or a beloved wife, or someone like that, or a close friend, and they tell you, hey, let's go follow after other gods. What are you supposed to do? He says, do not yield and do not listen. Now, he's going to tell them to do some other things to these people that we're not going to talk about in here, but read it, and you'll see what he says. But I think there is a point. He's going to say you've got to get rid of the evil among you. And the way he tells you to get rid of these people means that it's permanent, right? So what is he trying to say? It's serious. Is there anything more important than your relationship with God? There's nothing. As matter as how cool it might look, some miraculous sign, no matter how close the people are to you, no one is worth your relationship with God. There's no one or no thing in this world that is worth your relationship that you have with God. Your soul is the most important thing, and that's what he's trying to get them to see. And he says at the end of chapter 13, he will show you mercy, he'll have compassion on you and increase your numbers, as he promised on oath to your forefathers, because you obey the Lord your God, keeping all his commands that I'm giving you today, and doing what is right in his eyes. So we need to obey, we need to worship the Lord no matter what. Now, Israel's going to be, they're going to be tempted with this. They're going to go through that test. Will they pass? No. No, they won't. They're going to go after the other gods. They're going to have all kinds of issues, and it's going to come up over and over and over again. But Moses knows this is something they're going to face. The second thing he says in chapter 14, you need to live as God's people. Live as God's people. Okay? First thing he says is you're going to go into this new land. You're going to live in houses that you didn't build. You're going to eat food that you didn't plant. You're going to drink water that you did out of wells you didn't dig. But don't be like the other nations. They need to understand they do not need to be like the other nations. He said, you're the children of God, of the Lord your God, and do not. And he gives them a list of things to do that are a lot more, they were cultural things that have to do with the nations that they're going to be around. He's going to tell them, do not do those things. The second thing he's going to tell them is, you need to remember who you are. In spite of being around all these other nations that are worshiping all these other gods and having all these different kinds of customs and cultures and the way they do things, you need to remember who you are. He says in verse 2, for you are a people holy to the Lord your God, and out of all the peoples on the face of the earth, the Lord has chosen you to be his treasured possession. Okay? And he's going to go on and he's going to tell them in verse 3 through 20, do not eat detestable things. Take the time to read it. He's got a list of animals that they can eat that are clean. And he's got a list of animals and fish and different types of things, even insects, that are not clean, that they're not allowed to eat. And really the point that he's trying to make here is, it's not just about worship. Now when we talk about worship, we think about what we say church. We come here, we sit down and we have our prayer and we sing our songs and we have a lesson, and then that's what we remember the Lord's Supper, and that's what we call worship. But really, worship is an everyday thing. Worship is an everyday. You're doing that every day of your life, and so these Israelites had to remember. Listen, it's not just about the sacrifices. It's not just about going to the tabernacle or the temple. It's when they eat, they need to remember who they are. By the way they eat, how they prepare their food, how they act, all those things. And so worship is an everyday thing. And so we belong to the Lord everywhere we go, not only in worship, but in everyday life. Why? In verse 21, chapter 14, he says, but you are a people holy to the Lord your God. What's it mean to be holy? Who said that? Say it again. What's it mean to be holy? Okay, without blemish, pure. Yeah, clean, it means set apart, right? Yeah, is that what he said? It means set apart. It means that he took them and made them his special people. Out of all the nations, he set them apart to be his people. And so they need to remember who they are when they go into this new land and not be affected by the other nations that are around them. Point number 3. They need to take care of God's people. This is going to be towards the end of chapter 14 and through chapter 15. He's going to remind them that they need to bring in, and he's going to talk to them about how they're going to bring in from their harvest and the fruit and different things like that. They'll bring in this harvest, and they're to bring it every 3 years, all the tithes of the year, produce and store in your town. So the Levites, now who are the Levites? They're the priestly tribe. Do they get any land? No, they didn't get any land. So their job was to take care of all the priestly functions. And so he says, so that the Levites who are not allotted, who have no allotment of inheritance of their own, aliens and the fatherless and the widows who live in your towns may come and eat and be satisfied, so that your Lord your God may bless you in all the works of your hands. So what do they do with their harvest? They need to learn to share. They need to be able to take care of what God's provided them to take care of other people. And this is an interesting, he says, if there's a poor man among you, you need to open your hand. If there's a poor man among you, brothers, in any of the towns of the land that the Lord your God has given you, do not be hard-hearted or tight-fisted toward your poor brother. Rather be open-handed and freely lend him whatever he needs. Okay? It's an interesting in this chapter. In chapter 14, he says, there should be no poor people among you. Why shouldn't there be any poor people among them? Because it's their responsibility to take care of these poor people, right? They have a responsibility to take care of these. But in the same chapter, he says the poor you're going to have with you always. So you're always going to have poor people. But the point is, it's your responsibility to take care of those folks who don't have. Now, I love the way he talks about, he makes some contrast there. He uses that word being open-handed, right? It's a contrast to being what? Tight-fisted. So you get the picture there. He's talking about you're being tight-fisted, which means you don't want to help people, you don't want to care for people, and the difference between that and being open-handed. Okay? So there's never going to cease to be someone in need on earth. So be open-handed and free to lend to your brother, to your poor and needy in your land. Okay? So take the time to read through that chapter there. And remember what God did for you, the end of chapter 15. To give to Him as the Lord your God has blessed you. So God has blessed us in so many ways. And we have to go and remember what God has done for us so that we bless others. Okay? Remember that you were slaves in Egypt and the Lord your God redeemed you. That's why I'm giving you this command today. So, how do we apply that to us today? We were slaves to sin, and He set us free. We need to remember what God has done for us in our lives and where we would be if it wasn't for God doing that for us. All right. Point number 4, the last point. I told you we were going to move through this. All right. Celebrate God's blessings. He's going to tell them in chapter 16. He's going to talk about 3 different feasts that they're going to remember. The first one is going to be the Passover. Okay, you remember what the Passover is? It's when they put the blood on the doorpost. When they're getting ready to leave Egypt, they put the blood on the doorpost and eat the lamb. And when the angel of death passes over and takes the firstborn, they're to remember that. And so he said, you need to remember this feast every single year. They need to take it. And he has this month of Abib. Celebrate the Passover of the Lord your God, because in the month of Abib, He brought you out of Egypt by night. Okay? And so all along, they need to remember that Passover. Now, the Passover is actually the meal that Jesus is going to take before He's sent to the cross. And that's where He's going to institute what we're going to do here in a little bit when He takes the bread from the Passover meal and He takes the fruit of the vine from the Passover meal and He institutes what we call the Lord's Supper. That's when we remember His body. That's when we remember His death and we drink that cup that reminds us of the blood that was shed for the new covenant. So they need to remember the Passover feast. They're going to have another feast. It's called the Feast of Weeks. I got that right? Let me check my notes. Is that what it is? Yes. The Feast of Weeks, which actually takes place 50 days after Passover. What's significant about 50 days after Passover? $50 is Penta. So what happened 50 days after the Passover? Pentecost. And what happened on Pentecost? That's when the church was established. That's when the Holy Spirit was poured out. And Peter gets up and preaches the sermon, and 3,000 people were baptized and added to the church that day, Pentecost. This is this celebration that God wants them to celebrate. The Feast of Weeks that the Lord's given you by a free will offering in proportion to the blessings that your Lord has given you. And what are they supposed to do in this feast? What's He say? Rejoice. Rejoice. This is a glad time. Why? Because God's provided for you. This is kind of similar to our Thanksgiving, right? What's the purpose of Thanksgiving in this country? To be thankful for the harvest, right? For everything that God's provided for us. And so this is kind of a similar thing. To remember and to rejoice. And remember that they were slaves in Egypt. And so that when they remember these things, then they should remember that they need to follow the Lord. The third one he's going to tell them is about the Feast of Shelters. And that's when they would that was in the 7th month, and they would have to build these shelters, and they would stay in them, and they'd have this celebration. So it's Passover, Feast of the Weeks, and the Feast of Shelters were the three. In case you're interested in these things, I kind of like these things, but anyway, that they had to go back to Jerusalem to celebrate. And so, but they were to rejoice in all that God has given. And so in chapter 16, he talks about this Feast of the Shelters. And so they were to remember, rejoice, gather, giving, and worshiping in those things. God wanted them not to forget. And every time they got together to celebrate one of these reminders, it helped them not to forget what God has done for them. Same thing that we need to do the same, right? We need to remember what God has done. We need to rejoice in the Lord. We need to come together as people. We need to give, and we need to worship with each other. Okay? So 4 points through 13 through 16. And I blew through it pretty quick, but make sure and take the time to read it. It's a little bit more tougher reading. Not tough, but it's like, wow, the things that God is saying to them. So make sure and take the time to read it. But first thing we need to do is worship God alone. We don't replace Him. The second thing, live as God's people. Remember whose you are. The third thing is care for God's people. Do not close your hand. And the fourth thing is celebrate God's blessings. Do not forget what He's done. So those are the points. So at this time, we're going to do what Jesus asked us to do, and we're going to remember the Lord's death until He comes.